Hours-long court hearing today in federal court over flood insurance rates.
Louisiana is one of the states suing FEMA over Risk Rating 2.0. Sabrina Wilson has more.
People in South Louisiana have been sounding off for a while over rising flood insurance rates, and 10 states, including Louisiana, and dozens of parishes in the state have sued FEMA because of it. And a federal judge in New Orleans spent about 5 hours hearing arguments in the case.
I hope that the judge is getting the message that this is a really bad thing, not only for us, but the 10 states, the other 40-something parishes that have signed on the lawsuit.
FEMA oversees the National Flood Insurance Program, which has been financially strapped for years, and in October 2021, FEMA implemented Risk Rating 2.0, a methodology for determining insurance rates. Attorneys for the U.S. Justice Department who argued in court on FEMA's behalf said Risk Rating 2.0 modernizes rate settings and is fairer to policyholders because rates are based on an actual property's flood risk. Further, they argued that FEMA has a statutory obligation to set actuarially sound rates. But Liz Merrill, Louisiana's Solicitor General, argued that Risk Rating 2.0 is making flood insurance unaffordable for many residents.
It hurts us, and that the judge should block it. And if he can't block it in its entirety, then he should at least do certain things that he can do to make it better for people. So. And then stop FEMA from increasing rates any further.
St. Charles Parish President Matt Jewell was a witness for the plaintiffs.
We have conversations every day with our residents, and what they're seeing are these unaffordable flood insurance rates.
Casey Tingle, director of the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, testified too. He said if property owners get FEMA grants, they have to keep flood insurance.
They receive grants to elevate their home or to repair their home, and they are located in the special flood hazard area. And receiving those federal funds requires them to maintain flood insurance. And then if they don't, then FEMA is going to come back to us for the funds.
During closing arguments, Liz Merrill told the judge this is a hurricane of its own, but you can stop this storm.
If you look at the parish maps that we're showing to the judge, sometimes people's rates are going up 765%.